Jennifer Roskamp, also known as the Intentional Mom, which is kind of exciting because that's a little bit of what I'm talking about today. Intentional is a word that I love. I've loved it for a long time, and it was actually my word of the year for a while. But I want to talk to you today about how to use this time during the quarantine pandemic, how to use it really, really well. And I wasn't really planning on doing this video right now, but things are starting to open up. Some states, it looks like, are getting ready to start opening up. And so I didn't want to lose this message. I didn't want this to be lost. I didn't want this time to be lost on people who are going to start resuming their normal lives here quicker than I originally thought. So I wanted to give everybody the opportunity to hear this message before life kind of goes back to the normal things, okay? Because the thing is that this time is different probably than any other time you or I have had in our lives. And there have been some frustrations and struggles and challenges for sure, right? And there have been some things that are definite downsides to this time, but I think it's also important to talk about the other side, which is what I want to do here. I want to talk about the positive side to the quarantine during this pandemic. And I want to make sure to get this out there before you possibly miss it and go back to life. So first of all, I guess I want to offer a disclaimer that I know that this time has also brought hard things to the surface, right? If you are being forced to spend more time with people that you have struggles with or an ongoing struggle with, or just kind of clash with, I mean, this could be a difficult situation, right? It could also be that you have a lot of financial hardship as a result of this. It could also be that maybe you're like me, where you have an essential worker in your house, and instead of them having more time, they actually have less time, or maybe that's you. My husband is an ERRN, so he's working way more than he normally does. So I get that side of it too, especially from a personal level. So everything, I guess before I get started on talking about how to use this time, to be beneficial, I want to offer the disclaimer that I know that there are challenges that come as well. And we are actually experiencing them too. And on a smaller scale too, right? We've had things that have been difficult on a smaller scale, as have everybody, right? I mean, we've had 6 birthdays during this time where not only can we not do anything, we can't see anyone, we haven't even been able to get the gifts that I specifically wanted to get and things like that. They're all small, they're all minor, and they can all be overcome. But there have always been challenges. There's also challenges, I guess. So before I talk about the flip side of that, I guess I want to make sure that I acknowledge that and say that if you're feeling some of that too, I get that part of it too, especially on a personal side, okay? But here's what I think we need to do and what you should do to be able to capitalize on the positive side to the quarantine during this pandemic, okay? So it starts by doing some thinking. I want you to really look at this time that you've been quarantined, or that your life has been different, or you've been social distancing, or whatever it might be, and take an inventory of your time. This is, by the way, I should say, what I'm asking you to do here, and in order to kind of complete this challenge, if you will, or this call to action, is going to require some time to just sit and think and make sure that you work through these things when you have that, right? If you're like me and you often have kids running around you all the time, like, it's going to be hard for you to work through this with all of that too. So I would suggest that you wait until you've got some time to really spend an hour maybe working on the things that I'm going to talk about here, okay? All right, so now let me move forward again. So it starts by you taking an inventory of your time during this quarantine. How have you been spending your time? What have you been doing? What have your days been filled with? And here's an important question. So as you're doing that, also think about, what have you had more time for, right? That's kind of the one thing that I think we've all been given here, is that for most of us, again, people like my husband, essential workers excluded, right? He doesn't have more time, he has less time, right? So the things that we've been doing that I'm going to talk about here are all things that have been done without my husband, because he's not here, he is at work, or he's home sleeping, and then he's back at work. So for the most part, though, I think many of us will be able to answer these questions. And one of them is, what have you had more time for that maybe you have you haven't been able to take the time for these things before. So what have you had more time for? These are some things to think about when you're taking inventory of what your time, how your time has been spent. So what have you had more time for? Who have you been able to spend more time with? And I would second that by saying, while social distancing has not allowed us to usually be with people face to face, especially here where I live in Michigan. I mean, we have the strictest stay-at-home orders in the entire country here. We are not allowed to go anywhere. We are not allowed to have people in our homes. I mean, our governor has taken a really strict stance on what this means. So even though we haven't been able to see people face to face, it has opened the doors to teaching people in my family, like my parents, how to do a Zoom call. And I think, like I know, for instance, my daughter is calling her grandparents every day and doing a FaceTime with them. That's not something that she did before. It's something that she easily could have done before. But I think this social distancing is kind of forcing us to be more intentional and maybe even more frequent with keeping up with people in a different way than we did before, which is kind of cool. But as you're thinking about this, who have you been able to spend more time with? Also, what different things have you tried? This might have given you the opportunity to try some things where you've said, I've always wanted to learn how to do X, Y, or Z. Or I've always wanted to make these particular recipes that I've never had time for. Or I've always wanted to finish working on that. I've always wanted to finish decluttering my sewing area or whatever. So what different things have you tried or have you had time for that you just couldn't get done before? And then another thing to think about is, what have you had to give up, right? We've all had to give up things. But what positives have that brought into your life? See, I think it's really easy to just get hung up on the things we've had to give up. But I don't think it's very hard for any of us to be able to look at those things that we've given up and to be able to see a positive side to that. And maybe even in some cases, like me, you'll probably find some of these things that you've given up in the positive side and you actually prefer that, right? They might be things that you give up now going forward. Okay. So what have you had to give up and what positives have that brought to your life? And then finally, where have you saved money? When it comes to money, it's probably a give and take, right? So like, I'm spending more money on groceries because I'm having to buy things that I don't normally buy. I'm having to buy a lot of name brand things that I wouldn't normally buy. I'm paying more for things because there's like a limit on milk. I'm going to the regular store to buy milk and I'm paying like $2 a gallon, $3 a gallon instead of $2 a gallon. Like, things like this. So it's a give and take where I'm spending more on groceries for these reasons, but also I'm saving money on gas, right? And you too, you're like me, you're probably saving money on all the little places that you may have been running errands before just because you were out and about. And so because you were out and about, you bought this extra thing or that extra thing, or you stopped for coffee or whatever. And those things likely aren't things that you're able to do, at least not on the same level. So when it comes to where have you saved money, it's probably a give and take. But as a general whole, I know I'm going to come out spending a lot less. The extra that I'm spending for things is not going to add up to be as much as if I were to add up all of my savings on all of these other things. So where have you saved money? And again, I suggest doing these things on paper. When I'm asking you to take an inventory, I'm asking you to kind of just do this on paper because it's really good to help brainstorm. You're kind of brainstorming, and it's easiest to brainstorm these things not inside your brain, but actually getting them out. So maybe you want to do it, on a computer, right? But just don't do all of this. Don't unpack all of this in your mind. That's my suggestion. Okay. So along with where have you saved money, what have you learned that you can actually do without? Spend some time thinking about this. This has been a really eye-opening to a lot of people, I think, and in a really good way. If you had, prior to all of this, if somebody had asked you one of these things that you might write down on your list right now, if they had said to you, hey, do you think you can just give that up? Or do you think you can do without that? Like, you likely would have said, well, no, I can't, I can't. This is something that I need. Whereas now, because you're being forced to do without it, like, you might actually be saying, wow, I guess I really don't need that, or I guess I really can do without that. So just note those kinds of things. What have you learned that you can actually do without, and really just spend some time thinking about that. You'll probably find a list that ends up being a little bit longer than maybe you would initially think, as you just kind of go about your day. And another thing you might do is you might take this hour kind of suggested time to start working through this, but keep this list, keep all of these things that you're writing down someplace where you can get to it and add things to it. Because if you're like me, you'll spend this time working on it, but then as you're going about your day, other things will pop into your mind and you'll say, oh, that's right. And you'll want to write them down, because with this exercise, and really to be able to make the most and find the best positive side of this quarantine, you're going to want to have as many details as you can. So just make your list available, make these, wherever you're writing it down, available so that you can add to it. Okay. So what have you learned that you can actually do without? So here's a really good one too to think about. Frustrations aside, right? We can agree we have all had frustrations, and probably many of them, and probably on a daily basis. But here's a question to think about. How has your emotional mood and feelings been different? So it might be that you've exchanged some stresses for another, right? So for instance, you might be someone who is doing school at home with your kids now, and you have that stress, but it might be different than the kind of stress you feel getting them out the door in the morning and dealing with the after school time and everybody coming home and dumping all their school stuff, and then having to fight through homework and having to figure out how to make meals, and then fighting with everybody to get them in bed on time. And then you wake up tomorrow and you do it all over again, right? So the forced getting out of the rat race that we've all kind of had to do, it could be a trade-off. And so it likely is a trade-off. And so you have different stresses, you have different frustrations, but they might make you feel differently. And it might be interesting for you to think about how your emotional moods and feelings have been different than they were prior to all of this. It's just something to think about and something to note. I'm not going to necessarily say that one or the other would be better. I'm not saying that, the stress and whatever negative feelings you might have been feeling before are going to be more severe than what you're feeling now, or vice versa. But I'm just guessing that they're different. I'm guessing that your struggles and your stresses and your frustrations and the feelings those bring about then are probably different than what they are now. So it's just something worth noting, and it's worth thinking about. Okay. So here's what I think we should challenge. So once you kind of brainstorm, so everything that I've done this far and everything that I've talked about thus far has kind of been just kind of doing like a brain dump and just kind of thinking through all of these things. So once you have all of these notes and you've thought through all of these things, then we're going to shift. And here's what I think we should all challenge ourselves to do. And that is to think carefully about what we want to bring back into our lives. This is where it really becomes the positive side to the quarantine. So I realize there's a lot of things that we're going to have to bring back into our lives that maybe we don't want, right? You might say, I would love to quit my job, but that's just not my reality, right? I would love to be able to, maybe you would even say, I would love to be able to teach my kids at home, but that's not my reality, because once I can go back to work, I have to go back to work, which means I can't, teach my kids school at home anymore, which I could talk to you about that. But so you may have things that you would say, I would just assume not bring that back into my life, but I have to. But I'm guessing there's going to be some things also that you will have some choices in. So I want you I think we should all spend some time thinking about what we want to bring back into our lives. In so many ways, this quarantine during this pandemic time has kind of provided us all into a hard and really forced us into a hard and fast reset. Like there was no easing into it. It kind of just changed overnight, right? There was no, I really should cut back on some of these things someday, right? It's like someday happened right now, right? Which is kind of good. It's kind of good to sometimes just get thrown into the water, right? I mean, because would we ever really go into the water otherwise? I mean, I don't know. But all that aside, so we want to try to use this to challenge ourselves to think about what we really want to bring back into our lives. And I think right now, before we are all forced back into our old roles, we need to carefully weigh the person that we bring back into those roles, right? So you can't change the fact that you might have to work. You can't change the fact that, all of these different things, these things that you say, these have to come back into my life. You might not be able to change that, but I do think that you can change the person you bring back into those roles. Again, because we've kind of had this hard and fast reset. And you'll find that as you work through these things, this is something I've been working on in my own life for a few days now. And I found such value in it. That's why I wanted to bring it here to you guys, because it has been so helpful to me. And so having worked through this experience myself, I will say that by the time you get to this point and you can, discern, you can figure out what it is there's things you can't let go of. I have to work. I have to do these things. I have to drive my kids places. I mean, I would love to say, you know what? I haven't missed living in my car at all. I'm not going to do that anymore. Right. But the truth is my kids still enjoy their activities. My kids are still going to need to go places. So that is something that I'm going to have to do. But this reset time that we've been given has allowed me to reset myself and reset my emotions and know that I'm going to be making changes that will then bring a different person into that role. I know that the adjustments that I'm going to be making and that I'm going to be challenging you to make based on what you're learning about yourself here, I know that that is going to allow me to be a different and better person when I come back into those roles. And that's what I hope this exercise will help you do as well. So spend some time thinking and carefully weighing what you want to bring back into your life of the things that you really do have a choice about, which again, maybe this time has really allowed you to see that even some of the things that you would have classified as, I don't have a choice about these things, or these things have to be part of my life. Maybe this time has given you the opportunity to realize, you know what, I guess that is more of a choice than I realized it was. Okay. So it's so important to think about what you may have discovered during this time that's truly important to you and what is not. That's kind of what I mean by bringing a different person into these roles. I think, and even as I look at people talk on Facebook and different news stories and things like that, like it seems like it's not just me that is feeling as though this time has given us the opportunity to figure out what's really important. It's doing this for a lot of other people. And I think it's really important to capitalize on this now before life goes back. Because otherwise, it's real easy to just kind of forget about this stuff, especially once you go back to your normal life. Like your normal life has been your normal life for years upon years upon years. So it's going to be really easy and a really quick transition for you to go back into that. And so therefore, it's going to be really easy for you to forget about these things if you're not taking this intentional time now to think about, who do I really want to be going forward? And what is it that's really important to me? And therefore, what am I going to be doing from this point forward? So during this time, I encourage you to really sit down and reflect. Take the time to answer these questions, okay? So here's some things that may help you. And this is, again, what I have done. These things I think you might find really helpful to help you figure out, okay, this is all great. I know I need to do this. This all makes sense. Yes, I want to do this. But now how do I actually do that? How do I really start doing this? So this is what I would suggest. And this is what I followed, okay? So start with reflecting. Once you've kind of done that, we've done this up to this point, then look at your old schedule. Likely you have some sort of calendar or planner or digital calendar or something that you can go back and look at everything, all of your commitments, all of your everything in your former life, right? So look back at it and really try to now, with these new eyes that we've been talking about here, really start to look at what might actually have been optional. Again, you may not have thought about it that way before, but now you have the opportunity to think about it, okay? And then once you kind of do that, ask yourself these questions too. What do I want to make more time for? When I look back at my old schedule, now having lived through this month or 6 weeks or whatever it is this way, and these are the benefits I really have felt, right? Because we kind of covered that in the first half of what I talked about. What do I want to incorporate from my quarantine life into my new normal life, right? What did I learn that I really valued? What things did I really like about how I spent my time, and how can I make those things, these things that I enjoyed, that I'm now recognizing, these ways that I enjoyed spending my time and these things I learned about how I spent my time, how can I make that work in a different way in my old life? Okay, because your old life is the life that's going to be coming back, but hopefully we're going to be transforming that, right? That's our challenge. So what do I not want to bring back into my life? As you look back at your calendar, what do I not want to bring back into my life? Are there things I want to let go of? How can I make more intentional time a part of my life? Because I think that's what a lot of us have recognized, if you really were to kind of take a survey of what, I bet this would be one of the most things that people would say has impacted them the most, is that they've had more intentional time to do the things that they want to do and felt like they never had time to do before. So how can I make more intentional time a part of my life is a question you should ask. Maybe you would also ask, now that you've had this opportunity, if you're someone who's been schooling your kids at home, maybe now, having had this experience, you might say to yourself, how can I be more involved in my kids' school life? Not necessarily at school, but this will give you the opportunity, I think, to probably really help them at home in a way that maybe you haven't known how to do that before. So maybe you'd want to spend some time thinking about that. So then take things a bit deeper. So we've kind of covered the practicalities of looking at the schedule and what do I want to make time for and what I don't want to make time for. But then let's bring this all to the end with the really hard, deep questions, I think, but really good ones to ask, which is, what did I learn about myself? Right? That's a powerful question. How have my values changed? And if so, how? Have my priorities changed? And if so, how? Spend some time thinking about your favorite memories. That's something that can help you figure this out. So if you look back over the last 5 or 6 weeks, when have you really had the most fun? What have you really appreciated the most? When have you smiled the most? When have you felt the most peace and calm and just like content, right? Again, there's all those frustrations. We know that, right? But as you look back and say, what have been some of my favorite times during this time? Because when you feel more happy and you feel more content and you find yourself smiling more, we want to repeat more of that, right? That's what we want to do with our new normal. And then don't forget about the things you've learned about managing money. For most of us, we've also learned more about that, right? So it's likely that you've changed some of your spending habits. Again, it may not be in ways that you like, right? You might be used to, relying on going out to eat and grabbing, food out of your house more than you've been able to do right now. That's just one thing. But what of your spending habits has changed? As a money coach, what I hear all the time from people is that they can't afford something, right? I might want this, but I can't afford that. But when you're forced to change on how you manage your money, you often find things that you really can do without as a result, right? And so it's really important to spend some time reflecting on this. If you are someone who has ever felt like, I would love to take a vacation, but we could never afford that. Or I would love to be able to, update my kitchen, but I could never afford that. So use this time to look at how your money management skills have changed, and maybe some of your spending habits have changed, because it might provide the opportunity for you to start being able to pay for some of those things that you felt like you could never have afforded before. Because my husband and I did not become debt-free because we made a ton of money or because we had awesome jobs. We had normal jobs. We even had minimum wage paying jobs. My husband had minimum wage paying jobs with only him working for several years of our married life. So we were an only, one income family for most of our marriage. And so we didn't become debt-free then. It wasn't an easy road, but we became debt-free using the skills that I teach people every day. And that's intentional spending. And that's what this time has likely given you, the opportunity for some intentional spending. It's likely, as you sit back and reflect on this part of it, it's likely that you can afford, and you'll start to see how you can afford more than what you have probably prior thought that you could. Whenever, and again, this is outside of your required expenses, right? You can probably afford more or different things than you thought you could when everything is more intentionally weighed in how you spend your money. This is what I encourage people to do the most. As a money coach, this is one of my biggest hopes. This is my biggest hope for everybody, is that they have the opportunity to spend their money more in the ways that they want. That's my objective for everybody. Instead of always feeling like your money is going to all the places it has to go, that you have more of it freed up to put it where you want to go. Because unless you have unlimited money, you're probably like I do, where you have to choose more about where you want to save the money. so that you can spend it over here, right? None of us have unlimited money. As much as we would love to say yes to everything and not have to wait for anything, like that's probably not your reality. And that probably right now has become something that has been more easy for you to see, right? As you look and say, wow, I'm not spending as much money on gas. I'm not spending as much money on eating out. I'm not spending as much money on getting lunch out because we're not working and all of these things. So you take all of those lessons and you right now, those savings are probably really awesome, but wouldn't it be awesome if you could carry those going forward, right? If you're looking at all of the savings that you're having now and you're saying, wow, this is nice, I kind of like this. What you need to do now is figure out, how can I carry that going forward? How can I make it so that we're not spending as much money on eating out? How can I make it so that we're not eating out as much? Because prior you might have thought, I would never have the time to do this. I would never want to do this. I enjoy it. But maybe now you're looking at it a little bit differently. I don't know, right? So life has always been about, and maybe you just didn't realize, and even myself, I didn't realize to the extent, life is always about what you make of it. But finally, you have been given the time, as have I, to really sit back and think, who am I, right? And what am I doing? And what do I want to be doing? And where do I want to be going? And who do I want to spend my time with, right? And so that's what we're doing in all of this. We're looking at the lessons we've learned, and we're looking really at the changes we've been forced to make. And we're saying, all right, what are the things, where is it I want to be going? And how can how can the things I've learned help me accomplish that more, right? Because that's what all of life is, right? All of life is taking what we're learning and figuring out how to use that to move forward in maybe a different or better way, right? So I guess my challenge to you and how to really find the positive side of this is to really be able to find, in a practical sense, with your time and money, those are the most precious resources anybody has. And those are the things that we're not getting away with. I'm not saying family is not precious. Don't get me wrong there, but you need time to spend with your family, right? So really at the root of it is, more freedom in how you spend your time and more freedom in how you spend your money. If I were to have surveyed people 2 months ago, that's what they would tell me. I never have enough time. I never have enough money. This has been a really great time to force you into having a reset for both of those times. So before life comes rushing back in, which is happening, right? Take this time to work through these things that I told you about here and really use this time as a springboard to kind of create your new normal. Because it really could have been this really could be, as much as it's challenging and frustrating and all of these things, it really can be an awesome pivotal point as well. Because we've been given the time to really kind of reflect and really weigh, and we've been forced into having to make changes. And so it really can be a gift. So that's my challenge to you, is to really make this time a gift, really make this time something that you can use to your advantage. And our time is running out, on being able to do that. So it's Saturday morning. That's why I wanted to hop on here and do this right now. Before the world comes crashing back in, my challenge to you is this weekend, take the time to work through these, okay? I will write these all up in a blog post, and I will put that up on the blog, I hope today, so that you guys can reference this instead of just having to go back and back and back and watch this video. Because I want to put all these things in writing to make it really easy for you. So be on the lookout for that. I'll link it here on my Facebook page when I do that. And also, if you are a mom at home with kids, schooling your kids at home, make sure I'll also link to the video here. I'll put a link to the daily school at home planning worksheets that I created. Make sure that you take advantage of those. I feel it's a really good it's a really good place for you to be able to kind of figure out and map out your day. It's really hard to get all the pieces and parts coming together. So there's one for mom and there's one for the student. And then hopefully you use those together to kind of figure out how to have a little bit less chaotic days. So I'll link that here too, but use this time, you guys. It really is a gift, as much as there's challenges and everybody's facing them. And it's, an anxious time and things aren't back to normal yet, right? But before they get back to normal, use this time to your advantage, because you may not ever get a time like this again. I don't know that we'll ever get a time like this again on this magnitude and for this length of time. So that's all we can do, right? Intentional, right? Use this time to intentionally figure out who you are, who you want to be, and where you want to go. Okay. So that's my challenge to you. And that's how to see the positive side of the pandemic. See you later.